Now, 2 men accused in the Brendin Horner murder case have been acquitted of all the charges. Farm manager Horner was killed last year in the Free State. eNCA senior reporter Aviwe Mtila is covering that story, and he joins us now live. Now, Aviwe, the 2 men acquitted, we remember what this case did with a lot of protests and political parties also even joining in. What has been the reaction to what the judge said?
Well, Maseko, yesterday already the state conceded that it had no case in the charges pertaining to the murder and the robbery of Brendin Horner, 21-year-old farm manager that was murdered in 2020. We do understand, of course, now they've been acquitted on all the charges here. Even remembering that the state was really relying on circumstantial evidence in proving the guilt of especially accused number 1. Circumstantial evidence of Tarvin conversation that happened the day after, where the judge even said today, the judge president saying that their statements, the improbabilities, the contradictions, and some plain lies in their words, and mentioning that it's very problematic to rely on these witnesses. The same witnesses, Maseko, that testified on an earlier incident that happened 7 months prior, the stock theft charges, which has also been acquitted of here. I want to touch with the lawyers representing the 2 accused, starting with Dada Khoelenyana. Thank you for joining us at eNCA, but your reaction that your accused number 2 has been acquitted.
Thank you for having me. This is what we said from the beginning in Senegal during the bail proceedings, that there's no prima facie case against accused number 2, Mashamba, Sikweche, but the state decided to proceed. He is very delighted because he has been exonerated, vindicated, because he has said it from the word go that he never took part in the killing of Brendin Horner.
And then where to from here? They're going home, of course, now free of all charges, but any plans going forward?
Yes, I've already received instructions to institute legal proceedings against the state for unlawful arrest and detention, and also for malicious prosecution.
Okay, I want to move on to Ndate Machinini Motlowong, who was representing accused number 1, Maseko. Before I touch with the NPA, your reaction, of course, your client, we spoke to him yesterday, very eager to hear the judgment today. Have you spoken to him now?
I have. Actually, just before judgment was passed, I had a consultation with him, and I must indicate, he had to reminisce the moment these charges were pressed against him and he was denied bail, and that psychological and traumatic effect that this has had to him, and for him to have, gone this route to an extent that he had to stand trial on allegations that, from the word go, he had distanced himself from. And, for him to be found not guilty ultimately, this is not only about just justice being done, but sin to be done and justice having been served, sufficiently. And he's quite, very satisfied with the outcome.
Quickly, on the tip of justice being done, Dada Khoelenyana mentioned that he's going to sue the state. Any indication on where to from your side?
Indeed, we have also received instructions from accused number 1. He's going to apply for legal aid services in respect of pursuing a litigation against the state, specifically for malicious prosecution, and to a large extent to also litigate against the state for unlawful arrest. So all of this would then be handled by Legal Aid SA, but we have received instructions from that line to sue the state.
Okay, I actually want to go to the state, Maseko, quickly, and reminding you that already they were released on 5,000 Rand bail in June, only because the DNA results did not link them to the murder. Yesterday, in the course of the 4-day trial, we found out that they had alibis when Brendin Horner was murdered. And as I mentioned, the evidence that the state relied on was circumstantial evidence from Tarvin goers. I want to touch on with the NPA's spokesperson in the Free State, Paladi Shuping, just to find out. Thank you for joining us. It seems like the state really wasted the accused time and everyone involved's time in this matter, given that you really didn't even have evidence on this.
Well, that would be incorrect, because remember that the state got statements of witnesses, and those statements were made under oath. And that's the evidence that the state used against the accused in terms of their first application for bail. And the magistrate at that time was convinced that there is prima facie case for the accused to answer. That's one of the reasons why we had to continue with the case. Hence, we decided to place the matter on the court roll.
Couldn't the state have foreseen even the contradictions in the statements? Because even the judge made it clear that the confession that they alleged to have heard had different times to it, had different venues, and was spoken to different people. Surely you could have decided on hearing the statements that this was not worthy to pursue.
Look, those statements were made by the police investigating officer. The statements were brought to us. There were other additional statements that were made, and we went through all those statements. The biggest challenge that we have is that once the state witnesses took the stand, they sometimes distanced themselves from the statements that they earlier made, and some of them contradicted themselves. That's why the decision of the court was that they should be acquitted. And I think based on the fact that there were a lot of inaccuracies, it's a reason why our prosecutor considered yesterday that the quality of evidence that we presented before the court was not convincing for the accused to be convicted on 2 counts, which is charge of murder and robbery with aggravating circumstances.
And the state couldn't have pulled away when they heard that the DNA results did not match the 2 accused. And also just your reaction on hearing that the state will now be sued.
You must be aware that the DNA is not only evidence that the state must present before the court to prove their case. There are other factors that we have to take into consideration. With regard to malicious prosecution, it will be difficult for me to respond on that. But what I can tell you is that the law makes provision for our prosecutors to prosecute any person that upon receiving evidential material, they are convinced that the person has a case to answer, which is basically what happened here, because we are sitting with the statements that were made under oath from all the witnesses.
Okay, thank you very much. Paladi Shuping is the NPA Free State spokesperson. Yeah, as the 2 accused have been acquitted. Yeah, Maseko, a really interesting turn of events, even when we're hearing from the judge present, Kegni Musi, here on how the state really relied on these witnesses. The witnesses that coincidentally saw the incident that happened 7 months before of the stock theft, all contradicting themselves, mind you, on that particular incident, went on to be the very same witnesses that overheard the confession from accused number 1, even further contradicting themselves when they heard this alleged confession around the time that it happened, around the venue that it happened, inside or outside of the tavern, some of them saying, as well as around the people that were around when this particular confession happening, where the judge even said that it could not rely on the evidence of these particular tavern goers, mentioning that there seems to be some sort of conspiracy. So the 2 accused here have now been acquitted of all 3 charges, and really the question is, who killed Brendin Horner, the 21-year-old farm manager?
All right, Aviwe Mtila, let's leave it there for now. Of course, this is a case that actually sparked racial tension in the country, but let's take